I'd like to call this meeting to order. Mr. Nutlin, would you lead us in a flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sunshine Law Statement. All requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act have been met for this meeting of the Board of Education of the Borough of Oradell. Notice of this meeting was filed with the record in Town News, and all persons requesting such notice. Mr. Darian, would you read the mission statement?
Yes, the Oradell Public School District is dedicated to the ongoing pursuit of educational excellence through the comprehensive, innovative curriculum and instruction. The district is committed to providing opportunities for social, emotional, and academic discovery to foster curiosity, courage, and character. Our goal is to provide our students to become lifelong learners who are self-directed, resilient, productive, responsible citizens.
Thank you. Roll call.
On the roll, Mrs. Acosta. Mr. Del Greco.
Here.
Mrs. Downey.
Here.
Do not see Mrs. Norian. Mr. Nutlin.
Here.
Mrs. Walker. Mr. Walsh.
Here.
Mr. Darian.
Here.
Mrs. Nichols.
Here, open to the public for agenda items only. Moving forward, I don't have a report, but if you notice, we have one of our new administrators with us here this evening, Ms. Lori Cummings. We wanted to give you a warm welcome. Some of us already met Ms. Cummings in curriculum, and we were very impressed with your presentation. I think we're going to hear from you tonight, but we wanted to welcome you to Oradell, and I think you've already met some people, but you can see them, I guess, later. Moving to the superintendent's report.
Good evening. Ms. Cummings and I will be jointly presenting my superintendent's report today. However, we're going to begin with the Access for ELL's assessment presentation, which is our annual presentation of how our multilingual learners are progressing forward. As a reminder, multilingual learner is the new name we use for our English language learners. The Access assessment is administered in February and March of this past year. We actually just applied to be a pilot school for the new Access testing for kindergarten, and we're waiting to see if we have been chosen. We are hoping, we're thrilled that they are redoing that test. Screening 5-year-olds is really difficult, and I'm not always sure we get the most accurate assessment data, so I'm thrilled that they're trying to revise the assessment tool. These are the areas that are assessed on the Access testing. This testing is done one-to-one with students. And again, really what it's looking to do is to assess each student and see how they're doing on their journey from entering to emerging language skills, developing, expanding, bridging, and reaching. Every student gets a profile that allows the teacher to know what's next. What is it that I need to teach this student to help them move from expanding to bridging? And for the board, there is a copy of this in your presentation. I know the writing is a little small, but much of this is a repeat from past years. So I know you can't see the writing on those rubrics, but these are the rubrics that help the teachers to know and parents to know this is what comes next. This is what my child can do. That's why they are scoring a level 4. This is what they need to be able to do to progress to a level 5. So one of the pieces I want to start by pointing out here is that you will notice that we assessed 43 students this year. That is an increase for us. We, over the past several years, have assessed between 34 to 35 students a year consistently. So our multilingual learner population is growing at Oradell Public, and Dr. Roth, who oversees the ESL department, and I spoke today, and moving forward, we're going to consistently use the kindergarten and first grade band and the 2nd through 6th grade band. What started to happen when I tried to compare test scores from year to year is we have to have at least 10 students in a category to share their test scores. So some years we had 10 kindergartners, so we kept the kindergartners separate. And some years we had 10 students between 2nd and 3rd grade, so we banded them together. But that's making it really difficult for me to look at progress over time. So moving forward, we're always going to use kindergarten and 1st grade and 2nd and 6th grade. So you will see how many students were assessed in each of those grade level bands. 43 students were assessed of the 49 students who were eligible for access testing, which is an 88% participation rate. But what's really interesting about ESL is that a student can qualify and a parent can choose to deny services. So of those 49 students, 7 students do not receive ESL services. 2 of them were still tested. So sometimes we have to help a student move along more than just the classroom teacher doing that. And this shows you a breakdown of the 3 different summative score areas for K1 and the 2-6 band. So I'm going to stop there for a moment just to give you a moment to look at that more. And knowing that literacy is reading and writing, the fact that that is a lower area for our K1 students is not an area that is of huge concern at this point. We know that our students, their oral language is going to come first, especially their listening skills. When students are still hesitant learning a new language, and I think if you think about yourself, you're more likely to listen and you're more likely to write than you want to actually speak and be heard because you're still a little nervous. So moving forward, our ESL teachers have had this data and they have begun to use it to inform their instruction for next year. Every student who was assessed with the WIDA access testing, their parents have received their full score report. And 17 of the students who were assessed, so 17 of those 43 students, have exited the program, which means they scored at least a 4.5 on the test. If you score a 4.5, it says that you've met a level of English language proficiency that you no longer require dedicated ESL services. That does not mean that we will not continue to watch over you in the classroom. Those students specifically are actually students we look at very carefully in the upper grades and the content areas, in science and social studies and in math, to make sure that their native language is not negatively impacting their command of content. So from there, I am going to actually kind of keep moving forward, and then I am going to stop at the end for questions. So I'm going to ask Ms. Cummings to present a little bit about our math curriculum.
Good evening. So, over the summer, the curriculum team, as well as some of our teachers throughout the building, made some changes to our math curriculum K through 6. So why do we have to make these curriculum changes? So the Department of Education revised the math standards to provide clear and consistent learning goals to prepare students for post-secondary success. So in New Jersey, there is an emphasis placed on the opportunities for students to engage in mathematical investigation, communication, as well as problem solving. So with this in mind, the revisions clearly demonstrate what students are expected to learn at different grade levels, as well as within bands, so that all parents, as well as teachers, know what's expected to support student learning, not only as well as at home, but as well as at school as well. So in October 4th, 2023, these revised Math New Jersey Student Learning Standards were adopted by the State Board of Education. As per the New Jersey Department of Education, all local education agencies are supposed to have these implemented in September of 2025. However, Oradell Public Schools is ready to implement as of September 2024.
And part of that is, and she's going to get used to the fact that I just interrupt, part of that is we literally found out 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Like the Department of Education 2 weeks ago actually said, yeah, you don't have to have this for 2024, you have to have this for 2025. Well, I hope that somebody wasn't waiting for that announcement. It's time.
Typical of the
The New Jersey Department of Education.
So what changes definitely occurred in the New Jersey Student Learning Standards that actually made these revisions? One thing's for certain, the Department of Ed decoupled measurement and data into two different domains, measurement and data literacy. So the new data literacy is actually new to the elementary grades, which is going to lay the foundation for middle school grade statistics and probability standards, and then it's going to actually segue its way up into the high school statistics and data science courses. The next is going to be the new standard, which I'm very excited about, is money. Money, money, money. There's a new money standard that's going to focus on the progression towards later elementary for helping students to actually solve word problems, and it's going to be the expectation for students to understand the understanding of the coins, the dollars, as well as their values as well. So it normally started in second grade, but now they're going to actually bring it down to kindergarten and first grade. So this was another reason why we had to make those changes. So now, oh, excuse me.
I'm pressing at the same time as she is, and she hasn't caught on yet.
You're handling it well.
That's okay. So in grades 3 through 5, there's also an emphasis on fraction and reasoning. So of course, we're going to use more than just the number of 1/2, 1/3, but now we're going to have a visual representation of the model so that students can actually see why the fractions may be either larger or smaller. As well as there's going to be some text revisions, K through 6, replacing fluency with accuracy and efficiency. This prioritizes accuracy and efficiency over speed. They want to make sure that there's an emphasis on accuracy. They want to make sure that the students understand 1 + 1 is equal to 2, or 3 × 2 is equal to 6. So that's going to be the most essential aspects of fluency as well. So now, what's OPS going to do with all of this work? So what's going to be same in 2025? In grades K through 3, we're going to continue the use of Go Math as a primary math resource, and Big Ideas Math in grade 6.
And I know this is a difference from statements that I have made previously. We had all intention of adopting Amplified Desmos in K through 3. The company cannot guarantee us that they will have all the materials ready for this year. So we didn't want to find ourselves in October with a problem, and knowing that our curriculum uses multiple resources, we'll be moving towards Amplified Desmos, but K-3 parents will still see some Go Math resources.
We're going to continue our work on differentiating instruction in the regular math period, as well as in the math win period as well. As well as we're going to continue to support our teachers with professional development focused on math content. And now what's new in 2025? We're going to, of course, have the curriculum revisions to include the new standards. We're going to include supplemental resources from Open Up Math, K-5 Math Center resources, and then we're going to have the Amplified Desmo teacher resources for K-3 as well as grade 6, so that we can get the teachers excited and used to what Amplified Desmos Math has to offer. For grades 4-5, however, we're going to actually replace Go Math, and Amplified Desmos Math is going to be the primary resource. Why Amplify Desmos Math? After considering and researching several programs, we felt that this was the best fit because it combines conceptual understanding, fluency, application, as well as it does focus on mastery of skills. In addition, and the most important thing is that we're going to be implementing it jointly with River Edge. We do have professional development opportunities already set up in conjunction with River Edge as well. So in conjunction with our 3-year plan, what's going to happen moving forward? So we're going to continue, like I said, we're going to have professional development opportunities for all team members. As far as we're going to communicate with grade 4 and 5 team members to see how Amplify is doing. Do we need to tweak anything? Do we need to actually provide them with additional supports so that we can have full implementation to fidelity? In addition, we're going to rewrite the K-3 math curriculum to include Amplified Decibels Math for the 2025-2026 school year. And then lastly, any revisions that's going to be needed for the grade 4-5 will also take place after feedback for after year 1.
I'm guessing you may or may not have some questions about math, but I wanted to end my report fully, and then you can, if you have any questions about either the access scoring, our journey with math, which one of the pieces that I am most excited about teaching is we know that the teacher is the most important part of teaching, and the more we can do to help our teachers grow their toolboxes, especially in the area of math teaching, the less a resource matters because the teacher is the number one resource. So the piece that I am most excited about is we have put aside some of our title funds to run after-school math classes on content for teachers, because we happen to have a director of curriculum that actually has an undergraduate degree in applied mathematics. You don't come across that very often in educators. And as I shared, Mr. Warner is also a bit of a math geek himself. And Mrs. Hawley, as you know, did come here after previously being a math coach. So being able to use our own staff to teach our teachers to grow their knowledge. This really came from, we sent several teachers to the Prism Math Center, which is kind of an extension of Montclair State, in the spring to do a fraction boot camp, and they loved it. And we said, well, we don't need to send people there. We can do things here. So that is the piece that I'm really excited about. I'm excited that we can use our title funds, so it doesn't necessarily hit our local funds right now, and we can devise something that will help our number one resource, which is our teachers. Speaking of our teachers, we've had 15 staff members attending professional development on the science of reading yesterday, today, and tomorrow. If you walked through the front door today, you might have seen some Connect 4 and some ice pops on the front lawn. That is part of our effort to ensure that our community has plenty of opportunities to meet our new administrative team. This week, we also had our first parent focus group. This is one of the ways we chose to use some remaining ESSER funds. The Culture and Climate Survey gives us one voice from our stakeholder group, but we thought the opportunity to sit down and really talk to parents about how are things going, and the two of the questions we ask a lot are, what is your dream for Oradell Public School? What is your dream for your child? And what do you see as your role in helping that to occur? And so those parent focus groups are being run by Coach Stroker with Mrs. Hawley there as well. And we've spoken about this at a board level, but most of our conversations, and I did want to share this with you, this week are really about clarifying protocols to ensure consistent implementation in September, which I will share at our next board meeting, is one of our district goals, and that is something we have jumped right into to help the district move forward. So with that being said, do you have any questions about any of the myriad of topics?
Megan, can you go back one slide? So one of the things that, what I kind of want to understand is pedagogically, what is the difference between the Go Math and the Big Ideas Math? Like, why are we going from one to the other? Like, what is the significant upgrade in the two programs?
Okay, so it's not Go Math to Big Ideas, it's Go Math to Desmos.
I'm sorry, that's
So
right.
Big Ideas is our 6th grade math resource, and that is also the Riverdale math resource. So
Right.
that's actually why we use it.
Okay.
So a couple of reasons. One, Go Math wasn't developing conceptual understanding well. It was teaching kids to do a skill, but it wasn't building enough on it. It wasn't doing enough modeling of that skill. We weren't seeing enough hands-on learning to build understanding. We know that kids need to see things, touch it, and then we have the visual representation, and then we have the abstract representation. And we didn't really see that occurring. We also felt that Go Math, the application piece wasn't great.
Okay.
But part of it is that every time you have new math standards come out, we have been using Go Math for 9 years, which is longer than any of us anticipated using it. Anytime new math standards come out, it's a good time to, lots of programs come out with some new things.
How are the supports for parents? Because we're upsetting a major apple cart in terms of like, you give a new program.
Yeah,
So my question is, what kind of supports are there going to be for parents, for links and things like that, reproducibles?
So we are already planning a parent academy jointly with River Edge for parents in grades 4 through 5 of Amplify, and we will follow that up because River Edge is leaning towards doing that one virtually because they would like somebody from Amplify there. And we will follow that up with on-site, a grade 4 parent academy and a grade 5 parent academy.
Okay. All right, good. Thank you.
I will tell you also, because I know at least one member of our audience will like to hear this, the curriculum will be up as soon as you adopt it. And you will notice that that curriculum has a lot of links right in it that can help, a parent who wants to know more and also a parent who just might want some resources as well.
If there was a weakness in Go Math from K to 3, why are we still using it?
As I said previously, unfortunately, Amplify is not out for K3. It's not ready. So they pilot it. I guess to give you a little bit of background, Amplify Desmos started as a middle school program. It was used in middle schools, and it has been used in middle schools. It's used in the Glen Rock middle schools as an example. So the first thing they did was bring it down to grades 4 and 5, and they piloted that last year in schools. So the K3 one, it's just not ready. And what we did instead is, because we don't believe teachers should just use Go Math, we made sure that there were several things they can use in our math curriculum. So if Go Math is weak on a topic area, then in the math curriculum, there is something else from the Open Up resources or even a link from something in Amplify that we did have access to. But really, it's just that it's not ready. But we truly believe this is the best next step for the district. So to put kind of a bridge approach in place made sense.
Are there other programs? 'Cause the reason why I ask is Ford makes an F-150, that's a great truck, but they also made the Pinto that was a piece of garbage. How do we know that this is going to be age appropriate, grade appropriate for our K to 5 or K to 5-year-old?
Well,
K to
we
5.
spent an entire year looking at resources, okay? And Amplify didn't come in until the end. We were leaning towards a different resource. Actually, remember, we did this work with River Edge, and Mr. Werner actually had come back to that committee as the math supervisor in River Edge. He had just come from the National Council of Teaching Mathematics, and he said, I think we need to pause for a minute, and I think we need to look at this, because this combines the best of both. While Amplify Desmos is a new program, it is not a new resource. It had aspects being used. They just took all the different aspects that were out there that they already had, they put it into one packaged program.
And it's linked to the New Jersey standards.
Correct. Yeah.
The fluency part of it, where it's not focused so much on time, but on accuracy and knowledge of what they're doing, will that impact us for state tests?
I think it actually just, if it impacts us anywhere, and I think this is the best part about standards, when standards change a word or a concept or add something, it causes us all to stop and say, how are we doing that? So it's caused us all to stop and say, what are we doing here to ensure accuracy and fluency? So right now, I see this as, it's another way of saying, I know my math facts, but I know my math facts without testing me in a minute. I know my math facts because I'm showing accuracy and fluency all the time. So I don't see it as a huge difference other than saying this is still really important and we need to talk about how we're making it happen.
Thank you. Business Administrator's report?
Good evening. I'd just like to say that we have our new payroll person started. So now we're at full staff in the business office, board office, have my new assistant and the new payroll person. Things are going well. And then I'll just leave it at that because a lot of the building and grounds piece, Mr. Darian is going to cover in the next segment.
Thank you. Moving on to minutes, we have review of July 24th. Any questions or comments, please email Mr. Iapelli. We have approval of June 26th and July 10th. Do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the June 26th and July 10th minutes.
Second.
Any questions? Call the question.
On the roll, Mrs. Acosta,
Yes.
Mr. Del Greco,
Yes.
Mrs. Downey,
Yes.
Mr. Nutlin,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yeah,
Mr. Walsh,
Yes,
Mr. Darian,
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes, curriculum, Mrs. Norian is not here. We did have a meeting. Mrs. Walker, you want to comment on the meeting at all, or who else was there? Mr.
no,
Darian
I
was
think it was-
there?
I think it was a very productive meeting, and we learned a lot about the whole math program, and I think this presentation covered everything.
I think we learned that Ms. Cummins, what'd you say? Eat, breathes, and sleeps math? Is that what you told us? You did learn that. Anything to add to that? The minutes are in your packet. Anything to
Yes.
add to that for curriculum?
That was my first curriculum subcommittee meeting ever. I've been on the board 13 years. I thoroughly enjoyed it, but I have a lot of concerns, when we're moving from one math program to another, right? Because it affects the kids, it affects the parents, it affects the teachers. There is a cost sometimes, so, the board is concerned about, what are we committing ourselves to? Because the last thing we want to do is to change gears often. It's very disruptive. But, we've been assured that the company behind this, Desmond Math, is a good company, and that it's better than our existing, and we do have a good implementation plan. So I feel confident that, this will be successful.
Amplify is the same company we get Dibbles, that owns
Yeah.
Dibbles, right? So we're somewhat,
Even companies are becoming conglomerates, right?
okay, finance, technology, Mrs. Acosta.
I'd like to bring forward D1 through D9.
Yes, I know, I skipped, I'm going back. Do I have a second for finance?
I'll second.
Any questions on finance?
No, and for buildings and grounds, I think she knows.
What's D10 for, this edition?
D10, I only have D9.
You only have D9?
I have to maybe have the.
I might have the old packet.
Yeah. I
Look in
think
your,
it's-
look in your
it's
folder.
in there.
Did you look in your folder?
An addition? So I'd like to bring forth D1 through D10.
No, I'm going back.
It's one you keep under your pillow.
Did you have a question about D10?
Can you just make a new motion, because you just went through D9, I think, right? So just, you want to redo your motion?
Yep. I'd like to bring forth D1 through D10.
Mr. Darian, do you want to second that?
I'll second as amended. answer to D10?
What was the addition for D10?
Oh, they just, the way they submitted the payment, they missed, the number 2 should have actually been in the last meeting, but they missed the cutoff as to when it was.
Which one should have been in the last meeting?
D9 should have been more towards their last meeting, our last meeting, but they missed the cutoffs because they had the meeting dates. And so then they're trying to get caught up, but Mr. Pereira from Land, who's overseeing the project, has signed off on both of these. So they submitted one, and now they submitted another one.
So, Mr. Appelli, this is for, the MAC group is for the exhaust fans, is that?
No, they're the roof.
They're the roof?
Yeah,
Both
Okay.
are for the roof?
both are roofing.
And with these two payments of $320,000 and change and $38,000 and change, this is not the complete roof, right?
No,
We still have
this is
outstanding.
still only 80%. We have talked about it in the B&G meeting. I believe it's only 80. We're at 80%.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Just
Mrs.
an
Walker?
aside, we got an email today, I think, that Land has appointed 2 new gentlemen for assistant presidents in varied departments. Whether that has an impact on things, I don't know.
Any other questions? Call the question.
On the roll, Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
Mr. Del Greco?
Yes.
Mrs. Downey? Mr. Nutland?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Darian?
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols?
Yes, accidentally, I turned the page too fast. I'm going to go back to A. Mr. Darian, would you take administrative items?
Yes. Tonight we have 4 items under administrative. It's A1 through A3 is listed twice.
Yeah,
So
A3 is listed twice.
if you can change in the notes there through A4 instead of A3 and A3. These amendments are for, these items are for code of conduct, student handbook, mentoring plan, and professional development. So I'd like to introduce items A1 through A4.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions? Call the question.
On the roll, Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
Mr. Del Greco?
Yes.
Mrs. Downey? Mr. Nutland?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Darian?
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols?
Yes. Buildings and grounds, Mr. Darian?
Yes, before I introduce items for facility use, I just want to recap our latest Buildings and Grounds Subcommittee meeting. We actually met tonight before the board meeting. And because we're in the middle of summer work, most of the meeting was mostly just updates on existing commitments and existing goals. So we reviewed progress with the bathrooms, just a high level. I'm not going to get into specifics. We just discussed the bathrooms.
Can I
We-
make one comment before you go in?
Sure.
If the board would like the B&G minutes from tonight's meeting were put in our packets, if you want to follow along, because it's in your packet already.
This is the updated one?
It's from
Okay, thank you.
tonight.
It's hot off the presses.
Like a sec, feels warm.
Yeah. So you could see in the minutes that, the first floor bathrooms are in the process of being renovated, and we're going to be looking at the second floor bathrooms probably in the winter. We discussed the progress of the basketball court. We discussed the roofs that are being replaced, as we just agreed to pay one of the contractors 80%. We still have some work left, although it's minor. We're looking for metal fascia to be installed, and the part wasn't available, so that will be, finished later. One of the roofs that we have above, I believe, the music room is leaking, not into the building, but it's saturated within the roof, so we discussed possibly just replacing that entire roof instead of patching it. We talked about our rooftop units. We have 6 roughly rooftop units that are in different ages and status of needing repair. We discussed possibly looking to replace 2 of them, along with other Airedale units that we've committed to replacing sometime next year. We now have a new vendor for landscaping. They did a great job of cutting the grass and cleaning up the grounds. We did discuss a few other things regarding landscaping that we'll be addressing before the beginning of school in September. We discussed safety and security upgrades, the cameras, making sure that every door that's used throughout the day is covered with the camera. We talked about placing a camera out towards Memorial Field, and there's a few steps involved in order to make that happen. We talked about general cleanliness in the building. We do this every year, but we also talked about standard operating procedures for routine cleanliness throughout the year, and we have some goals in regards to that. And there was a few other items. We talked about possibly planting some trees and Sustainable New Jersey. These are programs that the state is implementing, but right now those topics were mostly pushed until later date. And that's all I have for the updates. And with that, I have just B1, which is facility use, to introduce.
I'll second it.
Any questions? Do you want to say something?
I have a question.
Mr. Del Greco?
How bad is that roof on top of the music room? Is it like just fresh, or has it been an ongoing thing for years? Is it soft?
So we have, every few years, we have a company do an assessment of all the roofs, and they make recommendations, and we plan accordingly. And every year, but every few years, we plan on upgrading when we need to. The music room roof, we were told, has some leakage. Although it isn't leaking into the building, it's just leaking within the layers of the roof. We had a scan of the roof to determine how much of it was actually wet underneath, and I believe it's close to 30%, 1/3 of the roof. So the contractor is like, it's really not worth fixing. Here's some extra money we would like, and we're just going to tear the whole thing off and replace it with new. So we thought, we'd be chasing a lot of money down a rabbit hole if we were to repair it, and so we thought we'll just bite the bullet and spend the extra money and have it fixed correctly. And then this way we get a warranty.
Would that be anticipated done over a break, or like not now, right?
They're currently working now on another roof, and I believe they would like to schedule this soon.
Oh, they're just going to hop over from
Yeah.
one roof to another, just
Yeah.
drop additional material.
Yeah.
That's efficient, yeah.
Yeah.
And the fence looks good. This is my first time driving up
Yeah,
Center.
I forgot to mention that. We didn't really talk about it other than, we did the fence. So, the goal of the fence was multifaceted. One is we needed something there because the kids play during the day in the softball field, and we wanted to make sure that they stay on property, and that's partially why it's there. And just overall to enhance security. And what's really interesting about it now is when you drive by it, it doesn't really feel like it's new. It looks like it's been there, for a while. But let me say that it was never meant to be exposed like that. We're planning on planting landscaping.
Yeah.
And so the landscaping will cover a large portion of that fence. And it'll look really nice once it's all finished. So for now, I think, we're moving along and we're getting things done, so.
Perfect. I have one final question, sorry. The cameras across the street, I see we're seeking permission to mount it on the pole. Did we have somebody come in with a test camera to test the fidelity of, it's either cellular or wireless, to make sure that from here, the distance over there, we get the right quality, the right image?
Yeah, actually,
choppiness?
I actually remember what they said. Apparently, our vendor who does cameras did an assessment for us.
Okay.
And they're speccing out the equipment, and they're filling out the application to PSE&G for what's needed. And they have advised us that their solution will work. So we're getting it directly from, the professional's mouth.
Okay. typically, just being in the IT field, right, you either have a device you put out there to measure, right, just because you have signal doesn't mean latency doesn't come involved, and then you have, fidelity issues. You might have pixelated image, depending on weather or weather conditions. You might have seen a perfect day, and then you have some interference or something. So I just want to make sure that before we invest the money to put this out there, that we've tested it fully, or they require us, or we require them to say, all right, if you back this and say it's going to work, and we have image issues, like what are you going to do to remediate it on your dime?
Yeah, so we're going to have a little camera with a screen, and then we're going to have a mirror, and then on our side, we're having like a telescope and a recording device. I'm just kidding. So it'll be fine.
Okay.
I'm sure if it's not in 4K, or at least 2K, but I'd like to see 4K with night vision. If we don't get what we want, what's the point of having it, right? So it'll meet all those requirements.
Perfect, thank you.
Mrs. Walker?
In reference to sustainable New Jersey and using them for some trees, be prepared, the trees come like this high.
Oh, really?
So don't put your money on those things.
It's kind of like what you get during Arbor Day in a newspaper.
Yes, exactly. The other question, do we have money, we're talking about landscaping all down that street, right? All down. Is there money that's going to be thousands of dollars, correct? So what's our budget there?
I'm in a good mood tonight, so we have endless supply of money. I'm just,
Some more ESSER funds.
we don't have money, and so as a result, you don't see any landscaping right now. We've been.
So that you're just sharing what
Our
the vision
intention-
is in 20 years.
Our intention is to plant, so whether we plant this fall or next spring or
Right.
whenever, it really all depends on when we'll have funds. It's challenging because it seems like this year our budget is tighter than normal years, and I'm not going to get to specifics why, but it's just some things you can plan and some things you can't plan, and our budgets are tight. So we have to be careful. We're also looking at additional expenditures with the roof. The rooftop HVAC units. So, we could spend money on landscaping, which would be great, and then we lose heat in the winter, and that would not be great. So now we have emergency, funds for that, but, you don't want to be dipping into emergency funds if you don't have to, and we prefer just to use our capital reserve accounts. So, long story short, I don't know. Yeah, we have money. We do have funds, but right now the priorities is not high.
Okay. Thank you.
Mrs. Downey?
What is the Good News Club?
The Good News Club is a Christian organization that rents a building for a Good News Club after school, whoever wants to go.
To spread good news.
I guess like a, what is it? Some students go to it. They've been here for 15 years. I have a quick question. I was late to the B&G meeting, so I apologize if you discussed this, but we had been waiting for, and I had it on my list, but I forgot to ask. We had been waiting to hear back from our HVAC contractor on the availability of, I think, a heat exchanger. Is that the part we were saying, like how difficult it would be able to get? Did we hear back from them?
Yeah, so one of the questions is, if we have a unit that fails, they're made by a company called Aon. Right? Is that correct? Yeah. And if we have a component that fails, do they support units that are 15 years old? Do we have parts available? And, the critical parts are, like an AC compressor or a heat exchanger. And we're asking our maintenance company, as well as anyone who's willing to answer questions as to whether or not those parts are available. And if they're readily available, or if they're available, if there's with back order, we need to know those types of things in order to decide how important it is and how quickly we have to move forward. But generally speaking, we're looking to replace at least 2 units by, at earliest, next summer, if not the following summer. So regardless of whether we can have parts on hand, we're looking to get at least 2 of the units, the oldest units, replaced.
But we did not get an answer yet, basically.
No, we don't know yet.
Can you reach out, Mr. Iapelli, again to them? Yes. Any other questions? Call the question. Mr. Nutlin?
Just a comment. I want to thank Greg for his work on this and, reaching out and getting other opinions on the state of the air conditioners up top with the heat exchangers. It's just an acknowledgement that, we're not just haphazardly throwing money at this. We want to make sure that we're getting the most bang for our buck and doing this the right way, for the taxpayers, So, I appreciate the legwork you did on that. Sorry, I missed that meeting.
Call the question.
On the roll, Mrs. Acosta,
Yes.
Mr. Del Greco,
Yes.
Mrs. Downey,
Yes.
Mr. Nutlin,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
Mr. Darian,
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Moving over to delegate report, Mr. Walsh.
I have no report at this time.
Mrs. Walker, personnel.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to present F1.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions? Bunch of additions.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mrs. Walker, you have a question?
I was just going to review a little bit about our personnel meeting that we had last week, if you would like, before we voted. Just a couple of important highlights of the meeting was that we discussed Ms. Bozio still continuing to update the files, going through things that have been let go for years. And there might be vacation days or sick days that have not been located or proven yet. So those are all things that she's in her spare time looking into. That was one thing. Also, staffing the LDTC position, the person has taken that position. And also, they're still interviewing for a part-time counselor that we had talked about. And discuss bringing back the lunchtime custodian, which I believe is on our minutes tonight. That, and I really think it's a good idea this nighttime, or this custodian, not nighttime, this custodian will be responsible for cleaning the lunchroom very carefully and also the bathrooms, because we're dealing with 800 kids. We're feeding them and they're using bathrooms and all. So I think that that's a great idea. So with that, I'd like to present F1.
Oh, and yeah, Mr. Walsh seconded. Any other questions on the report? Mr. Del Greco?
Just a comment that it's great to echo Ms. Walker, that we'll have somebody during the day, during recess, during lunch, to monitor the lunchroom based on the parent-client survey. Cleanliness was a large, I would say, concern, so I'm glad that we're tackling that and taking proactive steps.
Any other questions or comments? Call the question.
On the roll, Mrs. Acosta,
Yes.
Mr. Del Greco,
Yes.
Mrs. Downey, Mr. Nutlin,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker, Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
Mr. Darian,
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes, policy, Mr. Del Greco.
Thank you. We did have a meeting on August 7th, but I do want to call to G1 and G2. So G1, graduation requirements, we don't have graduation here, we have commencement. So we abolished that. And then G2, visitor policy and regulation. And then just audit. Audit was just some mandatory items that we had to, the updates are in our packet. Attendance, absences, excuses, sports-related concussion, and emergency preparedness. Most of these are just items that were being read for the first time now. And we also talked about student activity funds, discussed protocols for refunding parents' money if left over. Peter was going to call the auditor about protocols. From a visitor perspective, discussed language to be added to address the use of electronic visitor management system. disaster and emergency preparedness reviewed language changes that needs students with disabilities to be considered and documented when creating emergencies. And then sports-related concussion and head injury, just reviewed minor language change recommended by the NJSBA regarding the requirement that students be cleared by a physician, not just any healthcare provider. That's an important distinction there. And then attendance, absences and excuses. We discussed changes in code requiring submission of attendance data to the state, which no longer allows for a half-day absence. So you must count, it has to be 4 hours, not counting the recess or lunch. And let's see, discuss whether to have school protocols to match the same language, and then basically revise the policy. And then from an audit perspective, NJSBA recommended language changes to the policy. Very productive meeting.
I have a question. What are we're it's really first reading, but are we voting on the abolishment tonight? So we vote on the abolishment. So G2, we're not voting on, so we should move this roll call up to there. So you want to make the motion just for G1 then, I
Okay,
guess?
just the motion for G1 to abolish 6146.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions? If you have any questions or comments on the policies, they're all in your packets, email Mr. Del Greco, myself, the superintendent, before the next meeting, I guess. Any questions?
All the changes are in yellow.
Call the question.
On the roll, Mrs. Acosta? Mr. Del Greco?
Yes.
Mrs. Downey? Mr. Nutland?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker? Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Darian?
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols?
Yes, Public Relations, Mrs. Downey.
So we just had a meeting, and we discussed possible ways to share the data from the survey. We talked about doing superintendent board of ed. It's on. Oh, okay, it's because I didn't really want you to hear me. Okay, so we discussed possible ways to share the survey, doing superintendent board of ed, like meet and greets in the fall, and then just topics for the fall newsletter.
Yeah, so if you have any topics you want added to the, you would like to see included in the fall newsletter, just email Mrs. Downey and the superintendent, myself. If you have any suggestions you want to throw out now, you can. Usually it's new teachers. Mrs. Walker?
What about coffee with the superintendent?
Yeah, that's what Jamie mentioned, that we're discussing, they're going to be putting out some dates for maybe one in the fall, we'll start with, and go from there. Okay, so open to the public. It's dark back there. Are you awake, anybody? Looks dark. Moving ahead, any old or new business? Anyone have a need to go into a closed session?
Well, just
Mrs.
a
Walker?
quick aside, the landscaping looks great. I had texted Ms. Bozios that someone had approached me a day or two before the mowing and edging and all were done, that what's going on with the school, it looks terrible. And then that person said other people, and then all of a sudden, Ms. Bozio filled me in that they were hiring Brendan Coates. There was a bid out for the three, and he was chosen. And I think it looks like a good choice. I mean, for the first time, it looks very nice and neat, and it'll only continue to grow, I would hope, figuratively and...
We also, on that subject, we talked about how we're going to develop strategies to reinforce the grass throughout the property. And so instead of, I think what the takeaway from the discussions was, instead of trying to solve the problem as a whole, we're going to break it into small sections, and we're going to address small areas, cordon off those areas, and refortify the grass and develop the grass in that area, and then move on from section to section, as opposed to in the past, it was, oh my goodness, how are we going to address this big problem, and when will we have downtime, and, you know, what will we have rain, and on and on and on. So I think it's a good approach. I think we'll be successful. So I'm looking forward to seeing the change.
There was a former board member who I know was a big advocate of putting sprinklers in at the time, and I'm not sure where or how that would go, but, and this summer, we really didn't need them too much, but you never know.
Yeah, we have sprinklers in the softball field behind the
No,
property.
this is
Yeah.
on the school
Yeah.
property.
No, on school property here.
Yeah,
But yes, we don't have on Church, we don't have on Center, we don't have in the front. But, you know, this building was built in, 1928, and getting water to the exterior of the building is challenging. So, in the past, we had the PTA come to us, and they wanted to put an outdoor garden out towards where the basketball court is. It's out towards the back there. And in order to do that, you needed water. So they were willing to pay for a plumber to run piping to the outside of the building to support the garden. And then we took advantage of that, and we said, well, how much would it cost to continue to run piping so that we can put sprinklers in? And so whatever the additional expense was, the board paid, and the majority of the expense for the water was paid for by the PTA. And then that's what enabled the sprinklers in the back. If we put sprinklers in the side and the front, that's all on us. So, it's like something that would be nice to have, but, we painted the flagpole this year. That was in pretty bad shape.
Well,
The cupola needs to be addressed. That thing, no matter what you do to it, it just seems the paint flies right off it. It doesn't stay very long. And, I can just go down, a very long list of things that,
I think curb appeal is a very important
Yes.
part of, and I know Ms. Bozio has spruced this school up tremendously since her taking over the reins as principal. And I think we have to continue to maintain that. And I think the talk was years ago, with sprinklers, was that there were a couple of film companies that were looking, as you said, it's an old school, but it's well-maintained, so.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I agree. I remember coming through here a few weeks back, not this board B&G meeting, but the prior B&G meeting, and man, it looked bad. I mean, it looked bad. And, but, we didn't have a contractor to cut the grass at the time. So, and, it's not always easy when, you're trying to get commitments with people on, how much would they charge, and, when would they cut the grass, and, all of that. So it was looking bad, and I'm glad it's been resolved. But you're right, landscaping is very important. And we have more to go. I mean, we were discussing at B&G what we're going to do to prepare for September, and it includes more work, so.
And it's nice that we have somebody local.
Yeah, that too, because then we can go by their house and complain.
We'll send you, Chris.
I'll be the heavy.
Any other old or new business? Want to make the motion? Do you want to adjourn? Motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn?
I'll second it.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
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 Opposed, all right.